Hello and welcome again to SacTown Talks. Jarrett Blondin here, bringing you another show. Today we got a great guest, Assemblyman Kevin Mullen from the San Mateo, South Bay area. Kevin, how's it going? Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Jarrett. Yes, South Bay, San Mateo County, to be precise, is where I hail from. In fact, that's where I'm coming to you from today. I have the day at home here with the twins. I'm on daycare duty with my wife, but pleasure to finally be with you. I know we had to bump this a couple times, but honor to be with you.
Yeah, I know. Being COVID-19 and kind of sheltering in place with two young ones, I can relate as I have two boys too. Mine are 2 years apart, but definitely understand the challenges and the need to get outside. I guess, can you kind of talk to us about how, the last 5 months have been going, staying at home, kind of with the kids and balancing, work and, kind of being at home?
No doubt that it's been a handful with full-time childcare. We are blessed, though. We live with my mother-in-law here in South San Francisco. She had quite a bit of house to fill up, and we made a little bit of a transition at the beginning of the year before the pandemic hit, just because we were juggling with childcare already. So we live with my mother-in-law, and she's been a godsend. I don't know how people do it when they're working full-time, working from home with kids in the house. It's just, it's taxing to say the least. It has been a little bit of a blessing, though, I have to say. But my twins boys, Liam and Landon, are 2.5. And I'm definitely getting to spend much more time with them at this stage than I normally would have if we had been on something of a normal legislative calendar. So most definitely that's been the silver lining, is to FaceTime with the boys. But it's certainly challenging in this little office that I'm in right here at our house in South San Francisco. My wife and I share an office. She's not here right now. But it's really, really tight quarters, and we get on each other's nerves quite a bit. So it's definitely a juggling act, but we're still blessed that we are both employed. And I know so many people are hurting right now who have all these same challenges, but don't have steady income outside of the unemployment insurance. So you just really get a sense that this is a real struggle for so many people. And frankly, I'm reminded of that daily in this line of work, just the constituent casework we have with the EDD, and that's got a lot of attention lately. But so much need out there, and so many small businesses are hurting right now. So it's a somber time, frankly, to be in government when you simply can't generate enough help for people to the scale that they need it. So this is really extraordinary period we all find ourselves.
Yeah, no doubt. Interesting time, and I guess in your area, you were one of the first kind of counties to kind of shelter in place and kind of really get ahead on the virus and be aggressive. I guess, I guess it's a little different. San Mateo was kind of open, just got put on the watch list, but I guess how is San Mateo County and kind of your district kind of, I guess, dealing with this new normal of kind of outdoor operations and limited business?
Yeah, there was great concern really at the outset of the pandemic, given that we have San Francisco International Airport is run by the city and county of San Francisco, but is physically in the county of San Mateo. We have a huge international terminal, lots of travel to the Pacific Rim and European countries all over the world, really. We have a county that's an aging county. It's the most aging county in California. So we have a large segment of our population are over 50, over 60. So there are some high risk categories there. So San Mateo County was very aggressive at the outset of the pandemic in terms of the shelter in place. We were the last Bay Area county to be added to the watch list now, and that just happened within the last week. So our numbers have been, frankly, very good, all things considered. And the county's taken a very aggressive stance on a number of things. Yet for a while there, most of the counties in the Bay Area were sort of acting as one, sort of acting in unison. And then over time, different counties started to take different approaches. I think our county public health officer, Dr. Scott Morrow, has done a masterful job sort of balancing all of this. But just so much uncertainty with the school year looming and distance learning and the lack of training for teachers around distance learning. So the anxiety is palpable. Let's put it that way, especially if you have school-age children. So lots and lots of questions to be answered, frustrations with what people are hearing, and just the overall economic impact has been very pronounced here and throughout the region and throughout the state, of course.
I think something that's kind of unique with you is, you were born and raised in kind of in your district, and, a unique thing is your father actually represented the district. I guess, can you kind of talk to us about, what you remember from when your father was in office, and kind of how did that influence for you wanting to run later on?
Yeah. So I kind of joke with my dad that I was involved in politics before he was. That's not really true, but I was an aide to Jackie Spear, who was an assemblywoman in the same seat that I have now, when he thought about running for the city council. So I was working as a state legislative aide, and he came to the idea to run for our local city council here in South San Francisco. But he had been a civics teacher, government teacher for 30 plus years, and had served on the planning commission. And politics was something of a dinner table conversation. I don't know that he actually ever envisioned running for office, but he was sort of convinced to do that later in life, as more or less as he was getting ready to retire from teaching. Some local city fathers and mothers came to him and asked him to run, and he ran. And I ran his first little city council campaign. I shouldn't say little; it was a lot of work. Our city has 65,000 folks, and it was a citywide election. But it was a real thrill to be a part of that. And I probably caught the bug from that and watching him as a city council member. And when I was an aide to Jackie was instrumental in backing him when he decided to run for the assembly. And it was a hard-fought contest. I also ran that campaign for him. But I think working for Jackie, and I have to give a shout-out to Johan Claes, who was my very first boss in the political world, former assemblyman, former Board of Equalization member from the East Bay. I worked in his district office for a couple of years, and then met Jackie at a California Democratic Party convention. And she said, wait a minute, you grew up in South San Francisco, but you're working for Johan Claes. You need to come over and work for me at some point. So eventually transition, and she's been instrumental mentor for both my father and me, and she's now our congresswoman, and we value that partnership greatly. But I think I caught the bug that way, and eventually was a small business owner in the production field. My original goal was to do what you're doing, and be a journalist, and be an interviewer and host. And I do some local things on our local TV station here in San Mateo County. So I get to use those communication skills and background in that capacity, but found my way into politics and the city council as well, mayor. And then with the redistricting in 2012, there was a sort of a shuffling of the deck with the district numbers, and then Assemblyman Jerry Hill decided to run for the Senate, opened up this assembly seat, and I was fortunate enough to clear the field, get elected right at the time that term limits were being modified. So the class of 2012 is just a fantastic class to be a part of, really. We had a bumper crop, a big turnover. So we had a really big class come in 2012, and I think we have great relationships in that class. And it's hard to believe that we're already in year 7. Is it 7 or 8? I think it's year 7, I believe, of our tenure. Actually, 8. No, I'm sorry. We're in the middle of year 8. They go fast. So I've got after this term 4 more years left, but it goes so quickly. And you realize just how fast time goes when you're serving in the legislature. But it's been a fantastic opportunity, yet the tone and tenor of things has changed dramatically, of course, this year from a budget standpoint, and just from an overall sort of legislative trajectory. the nature of the service has changed dramatically in 2020 compared to our previous number of terms for the class of 2012, at least.
I think one cool thing that you've been working on this year, and you've worked on for the past few years with Assemblymember Lowe, is getting 17-year-olds, I guess, the right to vote in the primary election before they turn 18. Can you kind of talk to us about that achievement? I know that's something that your father had worked on prior, and kind of how you think that's going to look on the November ballot.
Yeah, this was very fortuitous set of circumstances this year for us to finally get that across the finish line. My father initiated that effort. It really started when he was the government teacher at South San Francisco High School. He would often get his kids involved in local city council meetings and school board meetings. And I think he would give them extra credit if they got involved in any particular city council campaign. He never steered them in one direction or the other, and never steered them certainly from a partisan standpoint. But he really wanted to encourage young people to get involved in civic affairs and in local government in particular. Local government is where he really believes that young people could have a direct impact and they could see the impact of their efforts. So that started him thinking about what are some other ways to get young people engaged early in voting and in politics, and maybe that kind of fires their interests and aspirations themselves. So he took that classroom experience when he came to the Capitol and introduced the ACA a number of times. He did it at least twice. Some of his colleagues stepped up and sort of carried that baton forward. And then I've tried it myself a couple of different times. So we finally this year were able to garner the 2/3 vote in both the Assembly and the Senate to put it on the ballot. And what's sort of interesting, it's actually a little surprising that it's been so hard for that to happen, because it's already in place in 18 other states, so-called red states and blue states. Some of the most Republican states in the country allow 17-year-olds to vote in the primary, but unfortunately it got sort of framed in a partisan context for some reason in California, and it's just not a partisan issue. Young people are actually trending toward no party preference, as a matter of fact. So it's not as though this will be some kind of a boon to the Democratic Party. And I did get bipartisan support, and we were able to get this on the ballot. And the key, though, I should mention, I need to give a shout out to my colleague, Evan Lowe, who had his own version of this, which is a straight lowering of the voting age across the board to 17. His effort got held up. He sort of rolled in with my effort, and we've been able to double team now Proposition 18, and that's going to be on the ballot. It's a little interesting numbering, Proposition 18 with the 17-year-old primary vote, but we're actually using that as an opportunity to remind people that these young people still have to be 18 by the general election. This would just enable them to participate in the primary, sort of looking at the election as a full cycle, primary and general, which is the way we should be viewing it. But it sort of builds on the pre-registration program that Secretary of State Alex Padilla has put into place, a very successful program. I think close to 200,000 young people have pre-registered. So it's sort of building on those efforts to engage our young people. So I'm hoping that it's going to be successful in November, but one, frankly, never really knows how the public is going to view this. I don't have access to any polling or anything like that. I just think it's a modest, reasonable expansion of voting rights for young people. And I'm certainly hoping that will be successful, and I will be very much involved in the campaign this fall.
Yeah, those were some of the more entertaining committee hearings I've ever seen on the opposition side of that measure, kind of off the wall. I guess another kind of cool thing that you do is that you run the floor sessions of the Assembly. Can you kind of talk about, I guess, how you kind of came into that mold, and I guess how running these floor sessions have been since coming back and COVID-19 and, social distancing and things like that?
Well, it's most certainly been challenging in the COVID-19 era. I have to remind my colleagues to physically distance. And if you know anything about politicians, they like to lobby each other. It's a people relationship business. So trying to sort of force the physical distancing on the floor has been a little bit of a challenge. But the members are all wearing masks. I think they're very mindful that a couple of our colleagues tested positive, and we just have to be continually mindful of that. But a little bit challenging with sort of the new procedures. But I love being Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly. It has been, frankly, a real gift. It's been a tremendous opportunity. I at the outset, I was talking about how I wanted to be a journalist and work in communications. It's actually a good way to utilize communication skills when you are presiding over the floor. The other little nugget, I don't know if you saw this on my bio, but I used to be a mobile DJ. And I would work the mic while I was spinning. Back in those days, it was vinyl.
Right.
I would mix records in college and post-college. And you'll sort of laugh at this, but running the assembly floor session, it's a little bit like DJing at a club, because you're reading the room, you sort of feel the energy of what's happening, and you're really sort of moving from point A to point B to point C, and you're sort of controlling the flow of the action. So I credit my old DJ skills to as being applicable in the role of Speaker Pro Tem. But it's been a real joy to be
helped you mold you in this way. Huh?
Yeah, and if I survive in the job, I think somebody on my staff looked it up. I'll be the second longest serving Speaker Pro Tem of the modern legislature. I think that since they became a full-time legislature. So I'm not quite there yet. So I'm working on number 2, which is appropriate because Speaker Pro Tem is the number 2 officer. So I'm good at the number 2 job. I could never do that number 1 job. That's for sure.
It's amazing. When I first started working this business, I worked on the floor unit, and Christine Kehoe was the Speaker Pro Tem. And, in my mind today, all those vote who desire to vote, I can hear her saying that. So,
yeah. Well, so the great Dotson Wilson, who retired, our longstanding chief clerk. By the way, Sue Parker, forging a connection with her as the chief clerk. She's doing an amazing job under incredibly difficult circumstances right now. So I wanted to give a shout out to Sue. But Dotson, when I first became Speaker Pro Tem, gave me a stack of DVDs to review. And it's sort of like a highlight reel of Speaker Pro Tems of the past. So absolutely, Christine Kehoe was there. They all have their own sort of distinct style. In particular, I remember Sheila Kuehl was presiding over the floor, and just absolutely masterful. Not only did she have sort of communication skills, being a former child actor,
right.
She had a command of the legal and procedural parliamentary aspects of what she was dealing with. So it was a multi-layered floor challenge that she was working her way through. But I was sort of in awe of that. And I'll never be able to match that. But it was a little window into how you could sort of put your own style on the job. And it's been a lot of fun. Got to say, I will absolutely miss that when I leave the legislature someday. I miss being a part of the action on the floor.
Right. I guess it's kind of been an interesting 2 weeks. You guys have come back into session, and there's been, I guess, kind of a little bit of drama about, I guess, shifting the bills between the Assembly and the Senate. I guess, can you kind of talk about, I guess, your legislative package and how it's transitioned to COVID, and I guess what kind of remaining pieces you're working on here at the end of session?
Yeah. So I tried to be a good soldier and dramatically pare back my legislative aspirations for the year. So we have really just a handful of bills still moving. Most of the action for me, very honestly, was before we went on summer break with the 17-year-old primary vote, which you mentioned,
right.
But also putting ACA 11 on the ballot, which is now Proposition 19. That's the property tax portability constitutional amendment that would bring tax fairness to second, third, and fourth homes When there's an inheritance, there's a reassessment that's triggered. So it's going to generate quite a bit of funds for local government, for fire protection. So the realtors made this a priority for them, since the portability will free up housing stock and create housing transactions, but will actually result in more housing being made available, build our capacity on housing, but also bring tax fairness, modify those inheritance rules, and deal more effectively from a funding standpoint with fire, funding CAL FIRE and underfunded fire districts across the state of California. With climate change, I really think we're going to be dealing with wildfire season year in and year out, and in some cases year round, which is something, as a California native, you would always hear about wildfire season, that late summer into the fall. But now with the climate issues, with the drought, although we're not actively in a drought right now, some are suggesting that this is actually a little bit of a lull, and we're actually in more of like an extended 10 to 12 year drought cycle. We've just had a couple of decent years, but I just think the challenges around climate are going to be ever present. So the wildfire protection piece of Proposition 19 is crucial as well. So I was pleased to put my name on that, but that was a little bit of a heavy lift. There were some political machinations going on, and always that dynamic between the houses, which has sparked up a little bit this year in the home stretch here with regard to just the volume of bills that each house is dealing with. But my hope is that those things can be dealt with effectively in the home stretch here. I'm just struck by how little time we have, frankly, to get everything done that we need to get done. And we just learned yesterday that we're not going to have another floor session, speaking of floor sessions, until the 24th of this month, rather.
Wow.
So we're looking at a super condensed daily floor session schedule in that final week. So my assistant pro tem, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, is going to get a workout as well. She and I are going to have a lot of time up there on their rostrum. So we'll be sure to eat our Wheaties that morning on the 24th. We're going to be going long pretty much every day, I think, that week. But we'll get it all done, and we'll be able to wrap up by the 31st. But then the question remains if we're going to come back for a special session or not to deal with all of the COVID-related issues. So we've got this public health crisis ongoing, daily challenges, but also just the economic fallout. And at some point here, we need to talk meaningfully about economic stimulus and economic recovery, because the budget this year was actually pretty decent because we were working off of 2019 revenues.
Right.
In 2021, we're working off this year's tax cycle, and it's going to be a extremely difficult budget year next year. And we're going to have to supercharge this economy to get it humming again. Of course, nothing really truly meaningful can happen until we get this virus under control. But I know that the governor will have to have one eye on, and the legislature will as well, on job creation. How do we get small business people back up and running? So the assistance in the short term, but also what are we doing from an economic recovery and stimulus standpoint going into 2021 to get the California economy back up and moving, which, as you know, is crucial to the national economy, of course.
Right. I know you were working on $100 billion stimulus package. Can you, I guess, go into detail of that and kind of how you see that, I guess, doing exactly?
Yeah. So I'm part of this working group. It's led by Phil Tang in the Assembly, our budget chair, Senator Hertzberg, the majority leader in the Senate. Those two leaders have taken charge of this. My involvement came because I was one of the joint authors of a climate resiliency and jobs and infrastructure bond, a $7 billion package coming out of the Assembly, which really at the beginning of the year was very much climate resiliency focused. As the year unfolded, we thought to ourselves, look, we're going to need to steer this more in a job creating direction and really looking at our natural resources infrastructure across the state of California. What can we do to make investments in green jobs? How can we position ourselves maybe to take advantage of federal dollars that come with regard to climate and green jobs? So that effort's sort of lost momentum because of everything that was going on economically. I think there was maybe some reticence to go to the ballot with all of the economic fallout that was happening, go to the ballot with a big fiscal measure. So we started looking at different alternatives, and I had a conversation with Senator Hertzberg. There's a way to move money quickly out onto the streets, so to speak, to create jobs. But with a bond, you have to actually get the voter approval, of course, but it takes time to sell those bonds and to get the proceeds and invest those funds into jobs and projects, even if they're so-called shovel-ready projects. It takes a while. Whereas there are some other mechanisms with securitizing special funds, doing some borrowing against expected revenues from the federal government. There are some creative things that could be done in the short run. Candidly, I think much of this was designed to engage the governor on economic recovery, putting a framework out there for discussion, bicameral, hopefully bipartisan, and really try to engage this governor around economic recovery. He has this business and jobs task force headed by Tom Steyer, who is very much a leader on climate issues and green jobs issues. Right. So we've had a number of conversations with him as well. So I'm hoping that some of these legislative efforts can blend with the administration's approaches on economic recovery, working with that task force. The governor was pretty clear he didn't want that task force to just produce a report that sits on a shelf. There's a lot of good minds at that table, and hopefully they engage with the legislature and the governor, and we put a package together that really gets money out on the street. At this moment, we have no idea, frankly, where the federal government is going to land. If the House versions of the packages, stimulus packages on the federal level actually materialize, California could see up to $46 billion, which would be crucial not only to plug our hole in the state deficit, but also get money out on the street and help people directly. But as of this moment, we have no idea really what is going to materialize from the federal level. So we're not waiting for Washington, D.C. We're taking some action on our own. Now, that being said, we are really, really on a tight time frame to put something together that could get the imprimatur of the governor, if you will, in support. So it remains to be seen what actually comes together. But I have no doubt this is going to be a conversation into 2021 and probably 2022. If you look at sort of historical deep recessions and the impact that they have, this is going to be a rough ride for the foreseeable future for all of us in Sacramento, which comes on the heels of really 7 or 8 years of continual growth and easy budgets and on-time balanced budgets. I anticipate next year's budget cycle will be most certainly the toughest one we've seen, and maybe the toughest one in a generation.
The news over the past few weeks about, different stimulus plans from Congress have been all over the place. Today, it appears that Speaker Pelosi and Donald Trump met and maybe came to some agreement. Obviously, as you pointed out, our budget this year depended on some sort of funding from the federal government. Then trigger cuts come. And as you noted, next year, it looks like, not many people are going to be making money, and therefore not many people are going to be, paying taxes. I guess kind of what are you hearing, I guess, from Congress and your connections in DC about what kind of a bipartisan plan is here between the Senate and the House?
I have no unique or special knowledge on that other than the dynamic I imagine is that the president wants to get money out there. He's having trouble in the polls right now. He is the decided underdog in the presidential race. I think it would, just from a purely political standpoint, it would behoove him to work with Speaker Pelosi and come up with a deal that gets direct assistance out to people. People are hurting right now, right? And he's got to know that. And he's the most visible face of the federal government and the most visible face of a failed COVID response.
Right.
So I can imagine him having a conversation with Nancy Pelosi. The friction of their relationship aside, there's a sort of pragmatic reality here where Speaker Pelosi wants to put a big package through to get help to people. The president needs some political help. The question is Mitch McConnell and the United States Senate, and at what point is the package too big for some so-called fiscal conservatives, which I could go on a rant for another half hour about that issue right there, and I won't bore you with that. But my hope is that we get real, genuine help from Washington. And should my candidate for president, Vice President Biden, be elected, I can imagine him as really his first major public act is to doing, a $2 or $3 trillion infrastructure package. I think he really wants to be sort of a new deal kind of a president, harnessing the power of government to create jobs out there for people who need it and rebuild the infrastructure of the country. I mean, certainly he'll be dealing with COVID and the vaccine, hopefully, and distribution of the vaccine. But from what I can gather, the Vice President, hopefully President Biden, is going to come out in 2021 with something really major with regard to a jobs package and infrastructure, rebuilding the country. And that's where California really needs to be positioned, given our import to the national economy. We need to be doing our thing on the state level to position ourselves to access federal dollars, match that with state money, and create real jobs and economic growth in California to help pull our national economy out of the ditch, so to speak.
Right. No shortage of interesting things to talk about this year. But, I guess one other thing I wanted to touch on with you real quickly was kind of, this whole social justice and police reform discussion. I know you recently wrote an op-ed locally. I kind of, if you could tell our listeners kind of your thoughts on kind of, the future of policing and, how we can do some real social reforms to help address some of these issues.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. And, we did take action with Dr. Shirley Weber's legislation on police use of force. On social justice issues, I was pleased to support ACA 5, repealing Prop 209 and putting affirmative action back in place in our public institutions. That, too, needs to be voted on this November, but I'm optimistic that will happen. On the policing front, we have a whole slew of bills dealing with transparency on police records. We've got Senator Bradford's legislation on decertifying bad cops with incidents in their past that have been proven. I don't know the fate of those bills, and I know that there is a great interest, certainly in my House, and I expect in the Senate as well, to do something big and meaningful on these issues. The Black Lives Matter movement is absolutely crucial, and the legislature is acknowledging that we really do have a moment here. While the Black Lives Matter is a ongoing movement, we in the legislature have a moment to act, and I think there's a great desire to do so. What I'm mindful of, though, is we are looking at the August 31st deadline, and these are tough bills with a lot of lobbying for and against. Right. But my hope is that by August 31st, we come up with a package. I know Senator Skinner, for example, also has a bill on transparency and police use of force. And I saw Senator Skinner my colleague from the East Bay, make some comments about rebuilding trust with the public between the police and our communities. And there are certainly some things we could do from a public policy standpoint to support rebuilding trust between our police and our respective communities. So my hope is that we will be taking action in a meaningful way this year.
No, definitely. You're talking about, I guess, the 24th, you're coming back for floor sessions. I guess you'll have 8 days of marathon floor sessions. And I guess as a graduate of Sarah High School, a lot of prestigious athletes have went there, and Tom Brady, still playing to this day. How close were you to Tom Brady at Sarah High School?
So, thank you for that. I like to tell people I came along after Barry Bonds, and before Tom Brady.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when are you closer to?
Yeah, I'm a little closer to Barry, I'm afraid, on the age factor. And I did play varsity sports at Sarah High School, but you could find me riding the pine at the end of the bench on the basketball team. But I have fond memories of my days at Sarah High School, and yeah, they've got quite a reputation from an athletic standpoint, and they're definitely working on the academic side as well. But I'm actually friends with Tom Brady Sr., and he and I will get together for lunch every now and again. And it actually started that relationship because there were some folks in the legislature who were huge Patriot fans, and they knew of my Sarah connection. And I said, okay, well, I'll ask Tom Brady Sr. if there's any chance we can get Tommy up to the Capitol, to honor him somehow. And he said, sure, but not until he's retired. And then at that point he said, oh, it'll just be like a year or two. Well, that was about 5 years ago. So Tommy just keeps rolling. But when he does retire, maybe before I'm out of the legislature in 4 years, we'll get him up there. As a California native and a District 22 native, I'd love to be able to bring him up to the Capitol and honor him. But we'll see. We'll see if that works out.
That's definitely. I guess one more thing before you go. I guess you do a little television yourself. Can you, I guess, tell us a little bit about the kind of local show you do and kind of what you're working on there?
Yeah. So, well, thank you for asking. This is really something I do on the side, just for fun, to keep my interview skills somewhat sharp. And it's a little digital media show we do online now, called The Game, which is politics. We talk about sports. We talk about business. I have a co-host named Mark Simon, and we're on the local channel here, Peninsula TV, just in San Mateo County, but hopefully we're reaching more people online right now. So we haven't taped a show in a little while, but we talked to newsmakers. Anna Eshu was one of our recent guests, and we always do an election night show too. So on election nights, when most of my colleagues are either at their own election parties or at the local Democratic Party event, I'm on the air doing election results. We talk about the national stuff, state stuff, as well as local. So I'm expecting we'll do an election show for 2020. It's going to be a huge election night. Right. However, it'll probably have to be a socially distanced kind of a thing. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you for asking. And people can find this stuff at PenTV, PENTV.tv, PenTV.tv. You can see all my attempts at being a journalist. Let's leave it at that.
We'll have to check that out. No shortage of things to talk about lately. So I'm sure you'll have a couple great episodes coming up. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. I know nap time must be ending and you got to go, but thanks for taking the time, and we appreciate it.
Right on, Jared. Really appreciate it, and always enjoy it. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.
Right.
Are called dreamers.